What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? Tonight we're going to be going over some anti-evolution video in the video from Off the Curb Ministries, and I'm not even making that up. That is what they're called. Off the Curb Ministries got in a room with 3 creationist scientists, and they gave their best refutations, like on the spot, simple refutations of evolution. Trust me, they're not spectacular at all, but I did have to learn a few things in order to rebut them. So, yay on me for having to learn shit, and hopefully I won't fuck it up too bad. And boy, is this a good one. Now, the guy, I have to say, does not know how to control his volume. For one thing, I mean, I think that his mic's okay. He is just deep-throating the mic when he talks. And so you'll have to excuse him, and I hope that it doesn't bleed through too much.
A treat, because I've probably got the 3 biggest brains, the 3 creationist brains in all of the UK right here next to me, and these guys believe in a young earth creationist. They don't believe in evolution, and I've got them to ask them one question.
Oh, what question is that? Off the curb? I can only guess that it's an anti-evolution question, like what proves evolution to be false. In which case, I have a list of 3 things that's gonna fuck you up.
Now, on the streets, as a street preacher, I meet lots of people who say, I don't believe in God, I don't think there's any such thing as a God, and evolution's the answer. And then when I start asking them some questions and say, so do you understand evolution? They don't. So what would be a sort of simple rebuttal to evolution which you could give to these young people or someone who doesn't really understand science? Let's start with Andy first, Andy McIntosh.
Okay, well, before we get to Andy, I'm gonna let you finish, Andy. I've been doing this meme way too much lately. I'm gonna let him finish here in a second. I'm gonna let him complete his thought and whatnot. But beforehand, I would say that you just need to do decent research on the internet, basic research, and you will be able to understand the fossil record, why the fossil record proves that evolution is an actual thing. You can go into biochemistry, you can go and you can look into the various experiments that we've done on bacteria to show that evolution is a real thing. These people love to just explain a way around it. They have an unfalsifiable narrative because they believe in the Bible. The Bible has to be true, therefore everything else is false. That's an unfalsifiable narrative. It's the same thing as the flat earth crowd. It's not like you can't bring anything to them in order to convince them they're wrong. At least these people. Normal fucking people, you have a chance at swaying away from creationism. These fucking people do it for a living.
I'd say to someone who was saying that, where does a feather come from? I've got a feather here, right? Now, a feather is made of things like your fingernail and the hair that I used to have on my head, but I won't pull it off. But, you know, feathers have a remarkable structure which is only seen at the microscopic level. Ask this gentleman or the lady who is asking this question, how come that when you put feathers back together again with a brush over the fingers over the barbs, they come back together again? There is an amazing mechanism of hooks going one side from each barb, and barbules, they're called, these are mini barbs. On the other side, they've got ridges on, so the hooks are sliding over the ridges, but at a microscopic level. So, yes, it's true that scales are also made of another type of keratin, and so the evolutionist says that keratin from a scale has changed into a keratin of a feather. But where did the structure come from? Tell me, how did it happen?
Okay, so here's a good part to stop at. I tried to give him enough room for him to make a complete thought and everything. So I hope that you guys understood what he was talking about, and buying time for me to pull up my thing. Also, though, we did have Chrismer who did a super chat. I like giving money to you like a stripper. Except with the amount that he gave, it's more or less like a drizzle. Or maybe it's hail because it's like all quarters. No, I'm just messing with you, Christopher. Thank you so much for the super chat. I really do appreciate it. But This guy wants to know, how did these things come to be? And I actually have some notes written up that I can spout off here about where feathers come from, in case you didn't know. But we do have a lot of archaeological evidence that shows how feathers have evolved over time. They actually evolved out of archosaurs. Feathers are most widespread in theropods. Those are the carnivorous type of dinosaurs. While there are some herbivores that did develop some feather-like structures, it was mostly in the theropods. They first presented as like these straight kind of wire or needle type of feathers. And so from there, what happened was they ended up branching out and making these, I guess, a little bit more simplified kind of feathers. Which by simplified feather, what I mean is that like they weren't like. They didn't end up being like as thin or as fine or anything like that as the feathers that we have now. They would be a bit more coarse and a bit more, I guess, thick, like thicker of the needle kind. But anyways, so from there, though, they continued to evolve over the hundreds of millions of years into the feathers that we have now. And in case you didn't know, they didn't originally evolve so that things could fly. That's not the original intent of feathers. That is just like a happy byproduct or use of them. Because originally they were used to like camouflage the animals in their environment. They were used to like attract members of the opposite species. And they were also used to like help their young survive or help them survive in some kind of way. That was the original intent of feathers. And it just so happened that like when these particular animals would run or whatnot, they could probably get a pretty good speed boost by using the feathers in order to catch the wind and propel themselves forward. That promoted the longer armed kind of animals that had feathers, because beforehand you had the animals, they were too big like body wise and their arms were too short to actually have any kind of flight or anything like that. So the use of the feathers promoted lighter weight animals and longer armed animals so that they could start to fly and glide and all these other things. And so that's how feathers formed. But this guy wants to say that they are like designed by a creator in some way. And this is not at all the case for feathers, because we have archaeological evidence that shows how they came about naturally, how they weren't perfectly designed. This guy's argument is that God handcrafted feathers to work like they do. But the fact that we have archaeological evidence that proves him wrong shows that it is indeed not designed by the creator or anything like that, or irreducibly complex, which is going to be a popular topic for this video. Also, the argument from design is the main argument that they use in different ways. So this guy right here doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, even though he's the creationist scientist with the big fucking brains. And in diatribe.
Everything is telling you that there is a mechanism here where you've got to have barbules on that side different to the barbules going on the other side, and that's the clever little mechanism in every feather. And did you know that every feather is controlled by a muscle on a bird, and that for some birds there are literally tens of thousands of different types of feathers?
Thank you, Professor Andy.
Okay, he added on a whole bunch of extra information right there, but none of them disprove the fact that we have actual archaeological evidence that shows the evolution of feathers. So this guy is just plain wrong, and it doesn't matter how you try to confuse your audience with how many muscles, it takes to control a feather, or how many feathers are controlled by one muscle, or anything like that, or how feathers work in general. Like, none of that proves that it was designed or handcrafted by a god when we have archaeological evidence that shows otherwise.
Macintosh. Let's come next to Professor Stuart Burgess. You need to Google this man's name. He's an interesting man.
I think one of the things I would tell people is the human body is full of amazing design and irreducible design. This is a kind of design where you need lots of components simultaneously for that system to have a useful function.
No! He hasn't really said anything of substance yet, but before he gets into it, I do want to say that the human body, I guess, is kind of remarkable, but it's also very evident that it evolved. I mean, you know, like we have various organs that are vestigial. We have various things that don't make a lot of sense if it was actually designed. So what I'll say is that if our bodies were actually designed, then God is the worst fucking systems engineer in the goddamn world. He's shit.
So, for example, in the knee joint, we have a mechanism. This is a parallelogram 4-bar mechanism, but if I invert that, I get an inverted 4-bar parallelogram mechanism. And if you have a healthy knee, you have one of these in each of your knees. These red bars are the cruciate ligaments, and they guide the knee. You also have a cam mechanism, the way the bones roll over each other. But this is an amazing design, and all engineers know that this 4-bar mechanism cannot evolve step by step. You need all 4 bars, all 4 pins simultaneously. It cannot evolve step by step. And lots of other parts of the body, we have this irreducible design. We have an arched foot.
Okay, he's getting into the arch foot thing, so I got to stop him and correct him on this whole knee deal. First of all, he's giving the human knee way too much credit for it being perfectly designed or anything like that. The human knee is an approximation of a 4-bar linkage system, and it's not perfectly designed because it neglects a lot of important mechanical features of this 4-bar linkage system. The human knee doesn't have rigid rods or anything like that that he's suggesting. The ACL and the PCL are very much like rope kind of things. They aren't rigid. They provide a tensile force to it, meaning that they can only really pull and provide that kind of force. And then the meniscus actually provides the compressive force of the knee. But besides all of that, we're actually able to compare Homo sapien knees with the knees of animals that are extinct, like other animals in our own genus, the Homo genus. And then we can also use that to compare to extant apes that are alive now. And wouldn't you know it, just like before, the evolutionary theory wins out, because as we go back in time in our own lineage, we see the knee becoming more and more ape-like. And that's indicative of our common ancestor, who was also an ape, that ended up, branching off into the different apes that exist now, us being one of them, and then the other apes that are out there, the bonobos, gorillas, and all that other shit. But what you find is that the original Homo knee looked eerily like the ones that are in the apes that are extant now, that are alive in like zoos and shit now. So yeah, that's what we would expect on the evolutionary theory. But on this fucking theory that he has that was specially crafted, I mean, I don't think that we would see like that kind of progression into the past, nor would we see the common ancestor having similar knees to the apes that exist now. Like we would see more special design, I guess you could say, and it's just not special. He also talks like the knee is some kind of thing that evolved out of other parts of the body. But ever since we began to traverse on the land, we've had some form of a knee. They don't look exactly like ours, like those particular primitive knees, but they are knees. Like they are those particular bones and those particular ligaments, and they move in the similar ways, using to propel us on land or whatnot. So it just doesn't make sense, like the whole special design bit, when you can actually tie it to archaeological evidence that we have, empirical evidence that shows that you are wrong. I got a super chat from JC. JC, does he know the human eye is proof of inefficient design as it is backwards? Correct me if I am wrong. Maybe. Lol. Yeah, the eye is I would say the eye is proof of an inefficient design, maybe because of the rigmarole that it goes around. Because you're right, when the light comes into the eye, it's flipped, and then your brain sorts it out. And the way that, and that's just how we evolved to compensate for how our eyes are designed. I would think that if a god actually designed our eyes, then it wouldn't have to go through a lot of extraneous things. Like it wouldn't obfuscate it to the point where it's a bad design. Oh. Oh, fuck me. Paleontological. Sorry, paleontological. Fuck. I said all of that shit, and now I'm going to have to correct it whenever I go back to edit it. That's okay. Paleontological. Thank you, KC, for correcting me. I'm guessing somebody in the chat corrected me. Thank you so much for correcting me. JK was like, no, everything else is upside down. Paleontological. Okay, paleontological. All right.
Which is a little bit like an arched engineered bridge. It cannot evolve step by step. All of the parts need to be there together. Just another thing I want to mention about the human body.
Before he gets to that, he started mentioning the foot, about how it's perfectly designed with an arch and everything like that. And what I have to say is that the foot wasn't designed. I think that it was more or less like shaped because of how we use it and what best suited our ancestors to survive in the environment. So yeah, I think that is the reason why our foot is like different than other apes in our category. So he's not correct when he says that the foot is perfectly designed either.
The human body is full of over-design. Our hands are not designed to throw a punch, as evolutionists say, or to throw a spear. They're designed to play the piano. When you think of the amazing skill that humans have to play musical instruments, that makes sense if God has created us, but it doesn't make sense if we were evolved to be hunter-gatherers. Just one last thing I want to say.
Honey, this motherfucker just said that our hands were designed the way they were to help us. Pianos were developed in the 17th century, if I'm not mistaken. I looked this up earlier to be sure. When was the piano invented? Yep, there it is in my search history. 1655 to 1731 is the guy. Bartolomeo Cristoforo. He was appointed by one of the Medicis in 1688. So it was between 1688 and 1731. So that was the 17th, 18th century is when that was actually developed. So it's kind of odd how apparently we were perfectly designed, like our hands were fucking perfectly designed for pianos when they weren't developed until fucking thousands of years after we started doing shit. And I think that he's trying to just say musical instruments in general, but I would think that it's more likely that we molded our environment around what we're able to do instead of like, you know, God created our hands a certain way so that we could play the piano better. Bananas, yes, bananas do fit our hands perfectly. You know what also fits your hand perfectly? Ukuleles were designed by God for us. Wait, no. Our hands were designed for ukuleles. Or one of the two. I mean, at this point, what's up and down? Because we're so confused. Anyways.
A lot of people think all academics in universities are confident in evolution, they don't believe in intelligent design, but having spent 25 years in academia, I'm amazed how many academics are very sympathetic to intelligent design. That doesn't come across in the media, but that's what I found from first-hand experience.
First-hand experience being Christian academies or Christian schools or Christian, like, universities. Like, I mean, those are the only places that I can, like, I don't know what his history is, but my guess is that he surrounds himself with an echo chamber of other creationist scientists, which I guess he technically is a scientist. I don't mean to be derogatory when I do scientist, when I talk about these guys, but I mean, they're trying to use their credentials to say that, oh, I have authority on this issue, and you don't have authority on this. Like, I don't care if you have authority on the issue or not. What you're saying totally contradicts the actual evidence that we have, the paleontological evidence. Get that shit straight.
Thank you. And Professor Stephen Taylor now, your evidence.
Well, when I teach at university, I teach electromagnetics, and also this year I teach electrical drives. And we try and study electrical machines. That's the things that we find in anything from a Hoover or a car or an electrical motor in an engine. But the smallest electrical drive on the planet is called ATP Synthase. Let me say that again. ATP Synthase. It's the motor in your cells. It does trillions of them in your body, and in fact throughout life on Earth, from simple cells, simple creatures right up to us. But also these motors are far more efficient than anything we can design, humanly speaking. They're more than 99% efficient. They rotate at speeds between 6,000 to 9,000 RPM, and that they produce the energy that we need to keep going.
Yes, Peachy. I do have to say, Peachy said, "It's a chemical reaction, you dumbass!" And then we got Josiah Hansen that says, "Irreducible complexity couldn't convince the judge at the Dover trial, but I'm a theist now. Derp, derp, derp. No, never mind. I thought about 4 seconds. I thought about for a second." What? Oh, not so much. Okay. Says, "Will you marry me? Bravo, Ragazzo." No, I'm actually betrothed to KC over there. We're on fianced, whatever. She's my on fiance. So no, I won't. I can't marry you. I won't. I don't know you. Sorry. Shit. I forgot. I forgot what this guy was saying. ATP Synthase. Or whatever. It's not designed by God, and suggesting that it's irreducibly complex suffers from the same problems that saying that, like, flagellum is irreducibly complex. ATP synthase actually evolved via co-option. it was labeled as a couple different things: excitation or co-option. I'm sorry if I'm really fucking that up to the people that know this a lot better than me. But we do have some origination in the DNA helicase or helicase, while other components seem to be derived from components that make up the bacterial flagellum. But what? Sorry. Who's your atheist? KC has already given John's family 2 goats and a parcel of land. Sorry. JC said, "So happy for you guys getting married. No one can withstand the power of KC and GE. You guys rock. Or you guys are the Gek from Fallout." I should hope so. KC doesn't know that reference, but I do. But let's see what else he's got to say before I move on with my little rant.
These stop, you and I die. That's how important they are. Now, the problem for evolution is this. Not only are they irreducibly complex, as Andy and Stuart have just mentioned, but also that you need to be alive for the evolutionary process to work. And without one of these things there, you would be dead.
Okay, so what he says here is completely and utterly wrong. So basically, that's not how life started. If he would actually have done the research on, evolutionary theory and what it says about this particular subject, he would know that simple bacteria, like bacteria that would have been part of the first life, didn't actually need oxygen in order to create the ATP. And so because it didn't need oxygen, it didn't need this particular thing in order to generate energy. It actually used glycolysis, and glycolysis doesn't require oxygen in order to operate. So that is most likely how life started to form, and then later on built upon this glycolysis mechanism in order to produce a more efficient one. So if you really think about it, under evolutionary theory, if you have glycolysis that produces very little amount of energy versus the ATP synthase that produces a whole lot more energy per glucose molecule, which one do you think would win out? Like, if we're going with evolutionary theory, it would be the ATP synthase. But that doesn't mean that that is the only thing that exists now, because like I said before, simple bacteria does not require ATP synthase in order to generate energy from glucose. So him saying that all life needs it is totally fucking false. What he's talking about is a very a high level version of life, I guess, like me, you, other animals like that. So you don't need that in order for life to happen, and he's just plain wrong about it, and it's obvious that he didn't do any kind of fucking research whatsoever before he wrote his hypothesis. I don't feel right calling it a hypothesis, because it's really just shit that he pulled out of his ass.
So it's a real chicken and egg at the nanoscale, and it's got all the hallmarks of intelligent design. The last piece of design I would, argument if you like, or evidence for creation is this. No one has ever seen a computer program that's been produced by a random process, because random processes cannot produce sophisticated levels of information.
False equivalence fallacy. Dumb fuck. You can't compare like a computer system to like biological systems. Okay? No, a tornado can't put together a Ferrari in a junkyard there. Old ass Feuerstein look-alike, I guess. No, he would have to be a lot fatter to be a Feuerstein look-alike. Anyways, you can't compare a computer like a physical computer to a chemistry situation. Like, these are these are chemical reactions that are happening. There are natural explanations that explain why they happen. There is no natural explanation for why an iMac or what's the current Mac computer that's popular? MacBook Air? Whatever the fuck. A MacBook Air can't grow out of the fucking ground. But I can guarantee you leave some food out for a while, bacteria will fucking grow on it. So you're just wrong about your comparison here, and I think that you should stop being fallacious as fuck.
You look at the genome with its billions of base pairs, and you find marvelous coding levels that we cannot understand. How is it possible that an unguided process such as evolution could produce something like the genomic code? It just doesn't stack up.
But yet it does stack up. It's perfectly reasonable under evolution, because evolution takes into account that we have these long time periods in which for it to happen. So you are limited by that. And I think this is probably what is the fundamental problem of most of these creationist guys, and the problem with evolution is that evolution takes hundreds of millions, billions of years for it to produce like what we have now today, like us. And it's a very slow process. But for them, they've only got 6,000 years to work with. So, of course, evolution can't be true in a 6,000 year model, which is what they stipulated this entire video to start out with. So, given evolution, and given how evolution, like evolutionary theory says it is to work, it's perfectly reasonable for like RNA to naturally develop, and then that RNA to naturally transition to DNA, and then from there you start building life. That is exactly what evolutionary theory predicts, and it's exactly what has held up in the actual evidence. The empirical evidence has proven it to be true time and time again. And if we find something that contradicts something in that theory, we can work that theory around and we can have it represent the entire picture of it. It's not that it was necessarily wrong before, but what happens is that we can refactor it to where it's more encompassing of the entire situation or the entire picture.
Bring God into the picture. You have the designer who designed us. You have the designer who became human to become like us, to die for our sins upon the cross, to rise again the third day, showing us who he is. The evidence is overwhelming, friends. You need to look at it for yourself.
Yes, please do. Look at it for yourself, because this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. I don't think that Jesus died on a cross and rose 3 days again, and now he's the savior of all mankind. And I don't think that because there's no evidence to suggest that. But yet, there's mountains of evidence to suggest that evolution is a real thing. We have proven it so many times that it's become a fact. Evolution is a fact at this point, but there's still an evolutionary theory about how it all works. And that's something that they can't get over either. But anyways, evolution's a fact. Get the fuck over yourself. And of course, they're not going to get over themselves. They're not going to change themselves at all. They're not going to do anything different. But anyways, that's the video for tonight. I hope that you heathens enjoyed it. So this is the point where we kind of wrap up a little bit for the video, but we're going to be going on to comments. If you're watching this on the replay, the comments won't be available to you for the foreseeable future, but if you're watching live right now, we're going to be going into comments. So if you're leaving, I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice, and I guess I'll see you heathens on Friday at 8:30 p.m. Central.